The Life and The Silence of Pelešjan by Pietro Marcello. We have Pietro Marcello and we have Mr. Pelešjan. Well, he's very kind, and for ethical reasons, he decided not to cover Pietro Marcello, and this is the reason why he is sitting between the audience, among the audience. And so I will let the floor to Enrico Magrelli. Good afternoon to everybody. Well, as Aliona said, if you have questions for Mr. Pelešjan, well, you can ask questions and we will see. Well, the silence of Pelešjan, this silence could be broken, and it will be a great gift for us. Pietro, please. Well, here we have many people here. Well, can you help us to see, well, something beyond what we saw in the screen and all the efforts to break this silence, all sorts of cooperation. This sequence wasn't immediate anyway. Well, let's say that this film was born as a game, because Stefano Francia and me, well, we were talking about the possibility to meet Pelešjan, and we had the possibility to do this thanks to Enrico Sciaretta, and so this was just a case. I was charmed by Pelešjan, and also for that kind of experimental film and Soviet film. So we started and we met Mr. Pelešjan, and he watched my films, and his portrait comes from this situation. We discussed, we talked together, and 6 months after we went to Moscow and we realized the first film. I never asked him something special. Sometimes it was him who gave us advices and who indicated something special, something different from our intentions. For example, the visit to many places, and we filmed him during the daily life. It is a sort of hybrid film because it is not a competition film. It is his portrait in a sort of devotion for him. And also with Sarafgaya, the editor, well, thanks to her, we improved our editing technique. Well, saying something, well, as we usually do during our meetings. This meeting in the Orizzonti section are sort of discussion without anything else. Well, when did you discover Mr. Pelešjan's films? Well, through Fuori Orario, thanks to Fuori Orario. So it is Enrico's fault. And then, okay, I knew Pelešjan's film through Fuori Orario, and then I started doing my own films. I knew, well, I got to know Stefano Francia, and there was a connection with Pelešjan, and this is a sort of studio, a sort of study film. I had the possibility to film him, and this is important because during the years there are many people who try to film him. Well, how could you convince him? This is the last thing I'm going to ask you. How did you convince him, apart from showing him your work? Well, I don't know. I had not to convince him. I showed him my films. We met in Moscow, and he accepted to take part in this project. And well, this is a great success anyway. Enrico Ghezzi, could you explain us why Mr. Pelešjan is important and why the film by Pietro is important, thanks also to For Orario? Well, it is not a question because obviously answers usually have a personal path, so... Well, talking about the cinema by Mr. Pelešjan, well, it is not the right moment. I think it to be one of the most interesting things, generally speaking, at least at the beginning, for this sort of humility, let's say humbleness, by Pietro Marcello, in order to insist to be here today and to be shown with Mr. Pelešjan as a sort of appendix. So this is a sort of respect and limitation for him. And so, well, I think that Pelešjan's history is one of the closest and openest histories because it hasn't been making films for many years. So if we listen to him and if we listen to people talking about him and his projects, this project seems to be some very great projects, but they are not. There is a sort of disproportion being able to finance something that involves all the contemporary history in the world, and it is a cinema that seems to be far away from us and from the present, and it can be fearful anyway. And from the beginning, we were into this project, and I think we wanted to talk about this, and we did it with Mr. Pelešjan. He never wanted to be recorded, a technical recording, just to understand this kind of mental relationship with and emotional relationship. Well, I remember that the first time we met, we were talking about the title that was just at the beginning, well, sort of first stage. There were me, him and his wife, and just we talked about his declination of the title that was not talking about cinema by Pelešjan, and this was something exciting, and well, it was kept out of the film, but this was the relationship we had, and Pietro, I admire him a lot, how he could go on. And well, you think it to be easy, but what I like the most, watching again this film, I think there is this kind of difficulty of his to enjoy of this given time, given a space that were guaranteed anyway, and so there is this a sort of ghost presence of Artavazd, and it was difficult to want something more because we needed something more. We had everything, cemeteries and all the other things. So the last thing is that, well, at the beginning, the first time of filming, I was late in the evening, and I went to Artavazd home, and we said, why are we filming on the streets? with the tripod. Well, this is not the right way to do it. Well, it wasn't a video really, because it was an interesting choice from the beginning. Anyway, which was Pietro's reaction? Well, he was a bit upset, and well, we said we have to film everything, and so at the end he decided to film himself with the camera. It wasn't so light in the end. And I liked this kind of, this resisting with his body and this mind. I would like to change this issue, as usually Pelešjan does during his writings and discourses. Well, this film is what it wants to be, a sort of oniric portrait. It is not an answer, a theoretical answer to an idea of cinema that is broken. It is perfect. And there is a part of his writings and his thoughts in which he says, I'm again against the idea of cinema as an art, a complex art. Cinema is as if it was a sort of mountain that is just there, and there are pieces dropping from it, and these are elements of other arts, as if cinema was just a mine of art. Rossini and him are two of the great filmmaker that talk about this. Well, I won't talk. Thank you, Enrico. We have not a long time, but maybe there are questions in the audience, in the middle of Pietro, Pelešjan, or just Pietro. Well, you have to choose. I know there are questions, but otherwise we can go on, and then Enrico will talk about this.
No,
it was just a gesture. No, I'm sorry, here there is a question.
Добрый вечер. Спасибо за Хотя фильм называется «Молчание Pelešjana», может быть, маэстро сделает небольшое исключение, ответит хотя бы на один вопрос.
Anche se il film si chiama Il silenzio di Pelešjan,
and if the film is called The Silence of Pelešjan, maybe without words, maybe the master will answer to my question.
Pelešjan научилось, наверное, не одно поколение документалистов, вообще кинематографистов.
About films by Pelešjan, many generations of filmmakers studied, and not only in Russia. So he is a master for many filmmakers. Maybe he knows this or not.
Есть лично для меня очень важный момент, когда маэстро Pelešjan подходит к могиле Сергея Герасимова, и мне очень важно понять, до какой степени действительно был важен этот момент, как сказать, связи с предыдущими поколениями кинематографистов, чем именно вот эти мастера, которые учили Pelešjana, были так для него важны. Что он у них перенял?
And in this film, there is a moment in which the master goes to the cemetery on a tomb of a great Russian master. So it is a master that goes to the tomb of another master. So maybe Mr. Pelešjan can talk about this experience, what this experience was made for, and well, how was this experience of teaching?
Вот. Задавали вопрос мне и вынудили, чтобы я говорил. Прошу правильно понять меня. То, что я не говорю, интервью не даю и так далее, это не каприз и не поза. Это принцип. Кино для меня это не синтетическое искусство, это кино имеет свой автономный язык. Кино не пьет воды литературы, живописи, поэзии, а пьет оттуда свои воды, откуда пьют эти виды искусства, отдельно взятые. Что касается этих моих родных мастеров, на что?
Chiedo di intendere bene, non
Well, what do
l'unione
you?
capriccio,
Well,
non
mine
è
is
una
not a
posizione
whim.
in qualche modo
It is not
sbagliata di
a
non
wrong
dare
position
interviste.
of not giving interviews.
Non gli do le interviste
Well, I
perché
do
questo
not
lo
do
credo,
interviews
non è
because
appunto
this is my
capriccio.
creed. It
Anche
is not
perché
a
io
whim.
credo che il
Well, I
cinema
think
non è un'arte
that cinema is
sincretica, non
not
è
an art,
insieme
well,
delle
a
arti, come
global
dicevamo
art
prima.
with other
Quindi
arts.
il cinema
As Enrico
si-
said before,
il
cinema
beve,
drinks
l'acqua da
the
ogni
water
arte
from
e
all the arts,
quindi
and
è
so
diverso da
it is different
la mia
from
posizione nei
my
confronti del
position
cinema inteso
in
come
relationship
l'insieme
with
delle
the
arti.
cinema as a
Intanto
global
invece ai
art.
maestri è un'altra
As far as
posizione.
masters are concerned, it is a different
Что
position.
касается этих мастеров моих, я вечно благодарен им. Царство им небесное. Они многое дали мне. Без них я не был бы я. Без них я не сделал бы эти фильмы. Герасимов говорил, что можно все сделать, то, что вы хотите, кроме контрреволюции и порнографии.
In quanto ai miei maestri,
As far as my masters are concerned, well, I must say them thank you. Especially a great master gave me a lot. Maybe I wouldn't be here if they weren't my masters. Well, they told me you can do everything you want, but maybe pornography and other things.
Controrivoluzione, scusate, controrivoluzione e la pornografia.
And against and being against revolution.
В конце моей учебы в Авгике курировал мною.
E lui mi ha curato alla fine dei miei
He
studi.
cared
Geek, è
after
stato
me, after my studies.
accurato
He was a
il
sort of supervisor.
Что касается Кристи, он просто принял меня в Авгик. Если бы не он, меня не приняли бы в этот институт. Когда я учился у него, он однажды меня серьезно сказал: значит так, давай договоримся так, ты будешь всегда сделать в фильме и всегда будете молчать. Вот я и молчу сейчас.
Invece Leonid Christie, il mio maestro,
Leonid
a cui
Christie
io
is
devo tutto perché
the
mi
master
ha fatto accettare il geek,
who made me
mi ha fatto
accept
studiare il
entering
geek, mi ha
in the
fatto prendere
geek.
in quella scuola lì,
And
quindi gli devo molto. Lui,
I have to
una
say
volta
thank you,
mentre studiavo,
especially
mi ha
to
detto
him.
molto
Once when I was
seriamente,
studying, he told
tu
me,
puoi fare di tutto,
you can do
ma, il
everything,
silenzio è
but
importante, cioè
silence
film,
is important.
parole, i film silenziosi.
Doing
Questo
films
è stato
without words,
l'insegnamento, sto
and
zitto
this
ancora, il
was
silenzio, è
my feeling, so I'm silent today.
Ci sono altre domande?
Are there other questions for Pietro or Mr. Pelešjan?
Forse non rispondo più, però.
Maybe,
Forse è il momento giusto.
well, it is the right moment to make him answer. There were right moments during you were working at your films in which you thought maybe, well, maybe the film would be different, but there were moments in which you thought a conversation was possible. Well, I have a lot of caution during interviews. For me, it was wonderful being able to film him without words. It was something delicious that something that usually cannot be done. Cinema is, generally speaking, with how, well, there is a voice-over, a voice-off, but not everybody knows Pelešjan. And so this is the reason why I made this film. No, to me it was really pleasant. Sometimes he let me film in just for 3 or 5 minutes. At the beginning he didn't told me to work without a tripod. And the day after I started not using the tripod. And well, I had to follow him because he used the time of the cinema without respecting fixed time. We came back to Rome with just a few material. We came back to Rome with 5 hours of filming. We hadn't so much material. And with Saraf Geyer, the editor, well, the editing was pleasant. And let's say that sometimes we use a sort of distance editing. We worked at a film dedicated to Mr. Pelešjan, and maybe this was the only reason. Let's say that the only different moment was when we had to use the text out of camera. It was a sort of silent movie to us. Are there questions? Pietro. Oh, okay, yes. The microphone is coming. Don't be shy, please.
I was wondering about the archival material where there is the session in the gig with Medvedkin and Shukshin. Could you talk a little bit more? Is there a lot of that material? Was that hard to find? And what was the situation they were in? Because at least when Shukshin was talking, I had the feeling there was some kind of tension. What was it?
I think the best way that you can ask Artavazd, because this material is from the exam of Artavazd Pelešjan. What? Sorry? Didn't understood, sorry. Che ha detto? Non ho no, but you can ask him, because this film coming from his house. And nobody saw this material, never. It's the first time in the movie, I think. Was not public archive.
Ну просто я не хотела это сначала сделать, потому что он сказал, что уже не хочет больше ничего не сказать, поэтому такой скромный второй вопрос. Есть больше таких материалов, когда учатся в Авгике?
Maybe since, well, the question was in Russian, so it was addressed to Mr. Pelešjan. It is about archives.
Это снимали во время защиты моего диплома мои друзья. Вот они дали мне этот материал. До сих пор этот материал храню у себя, как мой архив, собственный архив.
The
material of my thesis when I was graduating, and it is a sort of private archive, and it is my material, my private material.
Yes, this question is for Mr. Marcello. As you have had the good fortune that none of us have had to know Mr. Pelešjan from close up, are there things about him or insights that you've had as a result of the time that you've spent with him that you could share with us?
Can you repeat, please?
Yes, as you have had the good fortune to spend time with Mr. Pelešjan, a man who's known for his silence, could you share with us some insights or that you learned from the time that you were with him?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Yeah. For me, per me era sicuramente ho imparato un sacco di cose.
I learned a lot. Of course, it was a learning. Well, it was something I learned with him in Moscow. Well, I can understand many things. I could understand many things after, during the editing phase, also some advices he gave me. And well, this is sure, but it is a sort of strange mechanism, something that can be understood just after. At the beginning, I thought, well, maybe it is different. And then you realize that people can, anyway, they give you something. And it was very, very important to me. I learned a lot. And, well, that's it. Maybe it was a sort of involuntary teaching, but there was a teaching.
Per esempio, delle sequenze nel come potevano essere montate.
For example, how we could edit some sequences. For example, the sequence about Homo sapiens with paintings, with Renaissance paintings, and we chose together the paintings, and he told me which paintings I should have used. There was also the limit of language, but when I was filming, for example, usually I don't use close-ups because they are very important, and there must be a reason for it. And it was, in a certain extent, I usually think about him because he showed himself, and it is a sort of suffering. When you are in front of the camera, there is a sufferance, a sort of pain, and this was important, that he decided to show himself, and also his absence, absence, and silence, everything was just like that. And just for an anecdote, he was very lucky because he is not the first documentarist who decided to portray Mr. Pelešjan. Many other directors, like, for example, Užeka, who is now very famous, who tried to use the images of Pelešjan's film. He's quite obsessed by him. He tried to approach Mr. Pelešjan in Moscow. He was 20 minutes late to his meeting, and so the film wasn't realized. And thanks to Kinesis Society and other reasons, well, this film was possible. So we can. I wanted to ask something more. Well, we can extend our time. I don't want to be rude, but you said you have around 4 minutes of filming. Which was the longest time of filming per day? Well, it could be a first question, but well, I'll ask you. And what is present in this filming of, well, not evident, something more, something special? Maybe we can see something more. No, well, I think having used everything of these films. Well, no, we used everything. Sometimes I repeated some filming moments. Well, no, anyway, as far as what I filmed about Pelešjan is concerned, we used everything. Then we filmed something about St. Petersburg, Moscow, and others, but something that is just linked with daily life. And the last thing, why 3 or 5 minutes per time, each time? Well, it is sort of initiation. Something that must be developed with a sort of a chemical energy. This is why I decided to use a true film and not digital technique, because I liked, well, I was talking about this with Enrico before starting our process. I decided to use these developing times, and well, it is something that is getting lost. But his cinema is a cinema made with film, and so I liked the idea to print his face on the film. In these materials, we have also a long conversation by Mr. Pelešjan and Enrico, and we have, well, it was very nice because the last way to film Pelešjan, it was outside in Moscow, and this conversation with Enrico that nobody can listen to, here we have the microphonist who had to come back to the same places we were to record sounds and noises, and he had to come back at the same places each time we filmed something.
Grazie Pietro.
Thank you, Pietro.
No, certo, non volevo.
Well, I didn't want to. Oh, okay. Well, if Enrico told us something about what they were talking about, well, no, it's your own. Okay, so we can close. Thank you, Pietro Marcello, Enrico Grezzo, and Mr. Pelešjan. Have a good morning. Have a good afternoon, sorry.